everyone. Welcome to the Beyond the X's and O's podcast, brought to you by the Coaches Site, the #1 online resource for hockey coaches. This podcast is hosted by myself, podcasting president, I'm a mental performance coach and founder of CP Mindset, as well as Christy Piero, who spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in my junior days. Now we work together in the mental performance and leadership space. Chris, how you doing? We finally got to do a Ted Lasso episode. We'll get into that. Lots of other news going on. I'll let you dive into some interesting topics going on right now in the hockey world, particularly.
Yeah, you know what? Thanks, Gus. Things are going well. Hopefully you're doing well too, and certainly, hopefully the listeners are doing well. Certainly, NHL playoffs are going fast and furious. First round was pretty exciting. Before we get to that, I certainly would be remiss if we didn't mention, the BCHL. Probably the best junior A league in the country. Their owners and board of governors, I guess, voted to leave Hockey Canada. It's a very bold move. I know you and I have talked about being disruptive and in everything about the game of hockey, and from organizations to leadership to coaches to all those kinds of things. And it's certainly the BCHL is this is a bold and disruptive move. For me, as a longtime junior coach, and I think it's unique. I think they're trying to position themselves in a different level than the other junior A leagues in the country, but also maybe on par with the USHL and they're competing in the against the US junior teams. So either way, I think it's a great move. It'll be fantastic hockey. I think it'll end up being a magnet for some of the best, junior A players in the country, for those players who still want to pursue an NCAA scholarship. But it's very unique. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think they've got a nice little business model that they're putting in place there. Within 5 years, I think they want to have the pay to play model that exists across the country. They want to kind of do away with that. It'll be a very attractive place. It already is, but I think the league will be a very attractive place for a lot of players.
Yeah, no, it's impressive just even thinking how, I don't know, the past 10, 15 years, like it was a good, like it's becoming more and more of a good league, and like guys will get scholarships and then go there for development because it's such a strong competitive league already. And my understanding too, a lot of this, they were limited and they couldn't, get certain players, whereas major junior could, those younger age groups, and it gives them that option. And so definitely disruptive, which, some of our recent podcast episodes strongly feel there's needs to be some more disruption, bold action, etc. So that is certainly bold. And definitely interested to see, how things keep rolling out from that. Anything else you want to touch on that? Otherwise, I know the Leafers is a hot topic as well we'll touch on.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think we should move on because it's the Leafs and the city of Toronto, and maybe the hockey fans feel that they are the center of the hockey universe. And and they were able to get through, first time in 19 years, get through the first round, which is great. But unfortunately for them, it sounds like, or seemed like that's where they seem to be pretty content on just doing that. Kudos to the Florida Panthers. You knock off, the best team in the league, best team in all, in history of the NHL in terms of regular season, the Boston Bruins in the first round. And then, the Leafs, 365 days ago, the Leaf fans, Leaf management and coaches and everybody said it'll be different next year. It'll be different. Here we are, same thing. They got knocked out, and in 5 games. It's an interesting study. As I said, give Florida a lot of credit. What struck me, and I'll turn it back to you, Cass. We call this Beyond the X's and O's, and Matthew Tkachuk, who obviously fans in Calgary know all too well. He was interviewed after Game 5 and the overtime win. Nick Cousins scores the overtime winner for Florida, and Matthew Tkachuk said something really interesting. He said, Toronto, that team over there, he said, they're so talented. They're, everybody knows they're one of the most talented teams in the league, or they have a lot of talented individuals. Sorry. He said they have a lot of talented individuals. But he said, what we like to do here in Florida is we want to play as a team. And I thought that was an interesting statement. And he wasn't saying something overtly, but he was kind of saying something by implication. And we call this Beyond the X's and O's. When you and I kind of started talking about this podcast a few years ago, is with those kinds of thoughts in mind. The comments that Matthew Tkachuk made, and I've said time and time again on this podcast that when they interview the Stanley Cup champions at the end of when they're on the ice and they're interviewing the players all talk about everything beyond the X's and O's. They talk about the love for each other, how hard they competed, and can't believe so and so played injured, and we go to war with this guy. I lay down my life for that guy. Everything but the X's and O's. They talk about the brotherhood, the team, all those kinds of things, and I think that was telling.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, I think Florida's got something going right now. Obviously, beating Boston Bruins, is quite impressive, and then more or less steamrolled through the Leafs here. So, I've got lots of friends that are Leaf fans, etc. I actually was fortunate. I've got to go to was a game 5 there just this past Friday, and it's Leaf fans are pretty funny fans in and of themselves, and it's kind of ride or die, and there's a lot of stress and not getting to the conference finals, and they finally get out of the first round, and it's kind of almost like from a team and the psychology, all of that, of like, oh, we're finally out, and then it's just and they just come out and drop 3 straight to Florida. So I wonder how much that's at play, and how well the players' mindsets are dealing with all of that. I saw some stuff from Mitch Marner. I like the way Mitch Marner carried himself, at least in the last game. So it's interesting. I don't want to over comment on any particular players, because you never know what everybody's going through behind the scenes. Yep. But nonetheless, definitely a tough way for the Leafs to go out after finally getting out of that first round. So we'll see what happens now with management, with the team, with personnel. Lots of people love to speculate around it, but certainly an interesting psychological component with that team, and then obviously on the other side with Florida, they're coming in hot, and so we'll see how far they go. Anything else you want to talk about with the Leafers?
Well, just a side note, what I find interesting is in the NBA, the Miami Heat were the 8th seed, and they're going to the conference finals. They're playing the Boston Celtics, and now Florida Panthers, the 8th seed, going in and playing the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's the first time in history in the NBA and the NHL, 2 8th seeds from the same city, same city, are going to the conference finals as 8th seeds. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. And something to be said about getting those 7th, 8th, 6th, seeds. They're playing playoff hockey earlier than everyone else, right? So that's, there's something going on there.
There's something there for sure. Florida had to, they've been playing playoff hockey for a while. You're right.
So there's some momentum, some things help there psychologically. But anyways, we'll get into the episode. One other thing I want to mention, it's not live yet, but I'll definitely be there again at the Coach's Site Live. Reminder for people. Chris, we're still not sure yet, but scheduling. But I'll be there doing a little workshop midday, limited spots. So stay tuned for listeners. People that are going, you can only attend this workshop if you're at the Coach's Site Live conference in Michigan this year. Topic again, going beyond the X and O's, but helping your athletes stop worrying about mistakes, build resilience, and play with confidence. So gonna be diving into the top strategies, some of the best examples that we actually use with athletes, so coaches can walk away with very practical tips and a way to think differently and not just keep going about the status quo around the mental game. Which leads us into talking about Ted Lasso, because this is a masterclass in psychology, mindset, the mental game, mental health even, as well as leadership, obviously, is a big part. If you're not watching Ted Lasso, get going with you're missing out. Very entertaining show. We've wanted to do this podcast about it and more to come, and we'll see how many more we can squeeze in here. But we've been wanting to do it for a long time, and then we kind of delayed, waited for season 3, and then things have been busy, and we threw in a couple of those other episodes. But I really enjoyed, and we brought on Dan, and I'll let you maybe talk a bit about Dan. Also a contributor on the Coach's Site, who's a huge Ted Lasso fan. So he kind of reached out, knew we were doing it. So we're like, oh yeah, this is great. And he just posted this week. It's like a bunch of his friends gave him a bunch of Ted Lasso swag because he's definitely a huge Ted Lasso fan. So he was able to bring an extra little bit of life and insight as well. So really enjoyed the episode with him. What do you want to add on the Ted Lasso front here? And obviously we'll talk about some of the key points and then just let the listeners dive in.
Yeah, you know what? Like, obviously, I mean, Ted Lasso's taken, a lot of people by storm, and just because it's almost antithetical in terms of, what coaching is all about. And, there's no yelling and screaming, and, there's no, like, it's just, there's this down home kind of folksy nature of, obviously, Ted's approach and, to coaching and leadership. And I think it resonates with a lot of people. And obviously, having Dan on was great because he certainly, as I said, as you mentioned, he reached out and said, "Hey, I'd love to come on," because he's right into it, and certainly he delves into it. And I think he talked about maybe watching each episode 2-3 times, and it was really cool. And so I think some of the discussion pieces that we had were really, really good, especially around, stuff like vulnerability and authenticity and those kinds of things. And he mentioned, some of his experiences coaching minor hockey in San Diego. Like, he's based out of San Diego, and it's really cool, to hear how he's kind of using some of those principles that he's, from Ted Lasso, to be able to use that in his coaching practice. And I think that was awesome, just to talk about that. And it's just, here he has some of his experiences. And, as you mentioned, he's probably one of the most read people on the coaches site, some of his posts and some of the, stuff that he does right, which is really awesome. So he's got certainly a great way to articulate his thoughts. And so I thought that came through in the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Couple of the nuggets, we definitely dive deep in. Not too many spoilers. There might be one later in the episode, one little spoiler about the current season, but we really kind of dive into the beyond the X and O's part of the show, starting with things from mental health and the importance of vulnerability, leaning on others, creating trust in a safe place. Not just with the assistant coaches, but also in your coaching staff, but obviously with the players as well. So, and Dan was able to help, color some of that in. The other two big ones or probably three big ones I want to talk about: the permission to fail concept we talked about, and the growth mindset. I highlighted in there, but just to kind of layer it and get people thinking in advance. Everybody generally, I think, knows what a growth mindset is. It's that ability to keep learning and grow. Look at Carol Dweck's work. But people might know what it is, but it's not common practice. And the show does a great job helping reinforce that. And I think it's important to be reflecting on those concepts and how we then bring them to our life, and shows that can inspire us and role model in unique and interesting ways can actually help do that for not just coaches and people in general, but also athletes as well. And the other third thing that I'll say, and I'll throw it back to you, Chris, is around parents in the youth sport as well. And we got into that, especially from Dan's lens, and he's working with it. We've been in minor hockey. Well, you were one of the parents. I coached when I coached Karen, your son. But it's important for the parents' lens and looking at that and some of the ways that they can learn lessons. And we talked about that as well. But I won't share too much more because I want listeners to dive in, listen right through. Any other final thoughts before we let them go ahead here?
Yeah, I two things. We talked, as you mentioned, the idea of the growth mindset, and I brought up the Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Milwaukee Bucks and his kind of press conference at the end of the season, talking about whether it was a failure and that whole concept. I mean, that press conference, spurred a lot of debate in a lot of different businesses and sporting organizations. What is failure? What is failure in sport? All those kinds of things. And so I know we touched a bit about that in the podcast, and as it pertained to the growth mindset. So I thought that was really cool. The second thing I do want to make mention, and it was the idea of, the other coaches say kind of series, the Hockey Factories, and Matt Dumichel, who we should give a shout out to because he's been involved with the Leamington Flyers. They won the Sutherland Cup OHF Junior B Championship in Ontario. So good for Matt and the Leamington Flyers, who is coached by Dale Mitchell, former player of mine with the Oshawa Generals. So shout out to Dale Mitchell as a coach, first-time champion. So happy for him. That being said, Matt's done this unbelievable series over the last number of years on these Hockey Factories. The last one was on the Dallas Stars Elite program. And what was really cool for me in terms of how it pertains to this Ted Lasso in this episode was the idea of like setting a standard of, of who we are and what we're all about, and not giving in to parents if they wanted to negotiate for first line power play or first line ice time and power play, top, PP1 and PK1 kind of time. And so basically in that article, they talk about saying to parents, okay, you can go somewhere else. It's not, this is our culture. This is who we are about. So I thought that was, some of that stuff kind of came through in the podcast too, in the discussion. So,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. No, well, definitely enjoyable episode. And again, go check out Ted Lasso. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, reach out to us with any comments, questions, and enjoy the episode as we keep going beyond the X and O's.
Enjoy, everybody.
The Coaches Site is hockey's leading online coaching resource and was created to provide hockey's top coaches, leaders, and performance experts with a platform to share their experience and insights with coaches and organizations of all levels, with the goal of enhancing the development opportunity for their players. A membership includes access to 500 hours of educational videos, a library of over 700 drills, articles breaking down the latest tactics and systems, and the opportunity to join a coaching community of over 15,000 coaches from around the world. Regardless of the level you coach, the Coaches Site is going to provide you the ultimate coaching toolkit. Listeners of the Beyond the X's and O's podcast can save 25% off an annual membership by using the code BEOUTSTANDING when you register. Again, get registered today by using the code BEOUTSTANDING at thecoachesite.com.
CEP Mindset provides mental performance coaching to elite athletes, teams, coaches, and business executives so they can achieve consistent elite performance. Our one-on-one coaching programs help elite athletes break through their mental blocks and take their game to the next level.
In addition, we offer team programs that help athletes improve their mental game and leadership skills. An important part of these programs is we work with you, the coach, to go beyond the X's and O's. We help you develop the human skills of leadership and become your listening partner. Just like athletes need coaches, so do coaches.
And at CEP Mindset, we don't just work in sport. We also work with high-performing business executives and professionals, especially those who relate to being an elite athlete and want a similar approach to optimizing their performance in work and life. Find out more at cpmindset.com.
Welcome to Beyond the X's and O's. We have a great guest here today from California, Dan Arel. Certainly came to us through the Coaches Site, and I know we probably the most subscribed or contributor to the Coaches Site in terms of some of your content. So certainly it's great to have you on, and all the great things you're doing with coaches and coaching. Coaches not only in your association in California, but I think obviously the reach that the Coaches Site has around the world. So good for you, and it's great that we're happy to have you on the podcast here, Beyond the X and O's. Tonight we want to talk a lot about Ted Lasso, and I know Cass and I know that we're obviously big fans, but tell us a little bit about your affinity for Ted Lasso, seasons 1, 2, and now in the middle of season 3. So what can you tell us about what got you excited? Why Ted Lasso for you, Dan, and how does that connect with some of the things that you do with the coach and player development in your association?
Sure. So, Ted Lasso. Well, first I should say thanks for having me on. It's really an honor. I love this show. I listen to it regularly. So it's really cool to be on here and talking about, maybe one of my favorite shows of all time. But I stumbled into Ted Lasso because Bill Lawrence, the creator, is he makes my favorite TV shows ever. So, I mean, I don't know if he created Scrubs, which is, I think, the pinnacle of TV. And then, the lesser known Cougar Town. And then he goes into Ted Lasso. So I knew I was just going to watch it, even though at the time, I like Premier League football, but I'm not crazy about it like I am hockey or anything else. So like a show about football, I probably wouldn't normally just tune in, but knowing Bill Lawrence created it, I was like, okay, it'll be good. And then it was almost like watching part of your life come onto screen, where, obviously I coach youth hockey. It's not the Premier League. It's not the stress, but watching somebody deal with mental health issues and also have a family life. And then, my family life does not mirror his. I'm still happily married with my kids, but to watch how he's dealing with those problems and then still showing up for his team, still showing up for work. And I'd never seen a show that really portrayed mental health honestly like that, where, it wasn't something that everyone made him feel ashamed for, even though like he could kind of feel it a little and he wasn't sure how to handle. So watching that, but then also, and this is where he was so great at Scrubs when he created that too, you watch an episode where you could be laughing as hard as you can and then on the verge of tears or in tears, and then you can switch back from that in a moment's notice. And so you're laughing, devastated, and then 2 seconds later you're laughing again, and you've gone through that range of emotion. But then when it's over, you feel connected to the characters, you feel connected to the story, and you can find that thing that's like, I'm going through that. And then you kind of find that motivation to maybe be a better person. Because Ted is annoyingly optimistic, and I wish I could be that optimistic all the time.
What's funny? I've in all the discussions I've had with people about the show, I've never heard people talk about it from the perspective of the creator. In terms of that, like it's always been the perspective of, Jason Sudeikis as Ted Lasso. It's just kind of so that's an interesting take that you bring to it from the other shows that were created, like Scrubs and Cougar Town, and being able to understand that, make that connection. So that's kind of a cool, like I said, a cool connection that obviously resonates with you. So that's kind of interesting in and of itself. Is there, from a coaching perspective, in terms of you being a youth coach and kind of in the development space and both working with, the players, but the coaches themselves, is there something in the show that you've been able to bring to the ice, to the athletes, to the coaches that you work with? Has that happened in anything specific in that respect?
Yeah, I think so. One way, with my coaches especially, I really love how Ted is not afraid to not know. And so, like, it's no secret in the show that he doesn't really know much about, football. Like, he's a little lost, but he's got an assistant coach who is just buried in books. I keep a list of the books he's reading. I went online and I'm like, what books are being read? Because he's got a new book every episode. And I love the fact that he's able to say, what do you guys think I should do? What should I do here? And he listened to, Nate early on. They bring in, Brett Goldstein's character later, but he's number one, he's surrounding himself with people who are smarter. And that's one thing I very much try to do. Like, I want my assistant coaches to know more than I do. Like, if I can pull one in and it says, like, look, I know defense inside out. Great. I need you on my team, because I may know like aspects of putting the team together and running it in this way, but I need someone to fine tune. So I love the fact that he does that and brings in their input and never shies away from where his knowledge starts or stops. And I think as a coach, I think the most successful ones are honest about what they can and can't do. And if you try to do everything, and even if you don't know, well, you're going to start messing up the team. The team's going to not trust you. And so I feel like he builds trust that way. And I really liked that. And so I go out of my way to make sure even if I have an idea, this is what I want, ask my coaches, well, what do you guys want to do here? What do you think we should do here?
Right.
And, and be willing to say, all right, you know what? My idea is terrible. I'm done with it. Like, their idea is so much better. I don't even need to go down this avenue, and drop the ego. And I feel like he doesn't carry much ego. I love the episode where he wants to call it like Nate's false nine. And Nate's afraid to have it called that, because if it doesn't work, he's going to be blamed for it. But what I see is a coach saying, I'm not taking credit for this. You came up with the idea, you did it. He's not passing off credit to get rid of blame. He's wanting to make sure he's building up his staff. Yeah. And then with the players, I haven't gone as far as ripping off hanging a believe sign over the door, which has come to mind. But I take a lot of the things he says to them. I think sometimes, like, how can I reword this so kids understand it? Or how can I take that pressure off of them to go play a big game? Like, when we made the playoffs recently, we had a lot of kids who were there for the first time. And one of the messages was, hey, look, of course we want to go to the playoffs and win. And of course, that's the point. You're going to playoffs to try to win. Like, you made it here. You don't just go and throw it all away. But
Tell that to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, that's right.
Timely.
I couldn't resist, Dan. I couldn't resist.
No, I mean, you can throw all the shade you want at the Toronto. I'm with the
it's the
Penguins hat right
narrative going
now.
around. So yeah.
But I wanted them to take in that moment too.
Yeah.
So I said, when you go on the ice, this is youth hockey. I mean, we don't pack the stands, but there's a different vibe in the arena when you take the ice in the playoffs. You can feel the tension from the parents. You can feel, and I said, when you step on the ice, first, celebrate the fact that you're here. There's half a league that didn't make it. Those kids are done playing hockey right now, and you're here. Step on the ice and look around and just be like, I made it to the playoffs. And then go play your game. And whatever happens at that point. The score takes care of itself. You can only, go so far. And unfortunately for us, those were our last 3 games of the season. We didn't make it out of the first round, but we enjoyed the moment. We took that pause. And I see that from the show a lot, where there's that reminder that, like, you guys are playing a sport. And I like that kind of mindset. But also, I just love the way he motivates them. He finds those little things about their lives to know who they are, and then to kind of build. So like they know him, he knows them. And then I have stolen Led Tasso. We had some problem with kids just not really gelling on the team. Like a couple, we were going through a rough patch in the season, and they were after each other. So I spent the practice being extra hard on them, to the fact that they were just, all of them, sick and tired of me, and collectively. And suddenly, like, all their bickering was gone. They were just like, Coach is really honest today. He is making us work way harder. Why is he like this? Well, it worked. And so
I love it. I want to jump in because I think, I'm a huge, obviously, Ted Lasso fan. We've been planning and wanting to talk about it and dive into it in an episode, maybe even a couple more here, just because there's so many life lessons, leadership lessons, coaching lessons, mental health, mental performance, even. Like it's just packed with so many good nuggets to get people to reflect and learn, and then yet so funny and enjoyable to watch, and a great story. And it's hard to do a show about sports well, like it's without it being too phony and fake, yet too like dry and boring at the same time. So they've done a really nice job. And I've been encouraging people for years now, like, just go watch Ted Lasso. Like, if you want to learn about leadership, vulnerability, putting yourself, like, watch how he carries himself, the show, the morals. So when you say things like, how he surrounds himself with the Nates and empowers others and asks questions, like, to me, one of his great superpowers is willingness to be vulnerable. Although sometimes he holds back and we see the struggles, and he doesn't do it all the time, and he's human still. But I think it's a great reminder of, and Brene Brown's work, the power of vulnerability, and that actually gives us courage and strength. And so I love that. The other thing I wanted to jump on that you were saying as well, around, what's the greatest benefit to sport? Like, why do we play sport? And a lot of times we think the why is the results. And Ted's done a great job of kind of parlaying, like, yeah, that's the goal and the intent, but it's not his why. And he wants to enjoy the journey and, bring people together and cares about people. And so there's a different why there. And a lot of what I do and Chris does and what we do with our athletes or teams we work with, we talk about a lot, like, yeah, we want to work on our mindset because it's going to help you get results. But the more important reason is to help you enjoy the journey. And we can't all win at the end, but we can enjoy it. It's just a game. And, like, let's enjoy it. And when you do that, you're paradoxically more likely to win too. But it's flipping the script a bit. Whereas I think our society in general has got the narrative so backwards. And it's, in the season 3 and the dark side, like they're just like, it's all or nothing, just win, win, win. And, we've been doing a few episodes here of late, Chris, right? Just like on the kind of that war against the leaders and people, like, just doing things the old way, the wrong way, and not putting athletes and the experience first, because we're just so caught up in this mentality of, like, this is the way it's always been. Well, we know other ways now, and it's not the right way to treat people and interact and get the most out of your teams and lead in a caring, loving, vulnerable but strong and still have structure, and sometimes pull out a lead tasso and like, have, uniqueness to it. But I think it does such a good job, and we need more Ted Lasso in coaching and in sport. So I'm loving everything you're saying, and that's we're gonna go on a couple different rants here, but I'm not sure if you want to spin off that at all. But that's been listening to you talk. I'm like, oh, I want to chime in here. So that's some of my big takeaways too.
Yeah, I think, one thing I thought of with Led Tasso, which made me laugh, is how kind of even funny he was during that, where like he was calling them like things like poo-poo heads. He wasn't, and so but you compare that to like the movie Miracle, and you've got, Herb Brooks skating them until they say they play for Team USA, and they're throwing up, they're like, those are two. That's almost like the same tactic being done in two different ways, because he was trying to make that team unite and angry against him, but he did it through like brute punishment. But then you've got Ted Lasso coming in, who he kind of just yells and makes a big show and makes them all mad, but he doesn't like physically punish them. He doesn't put them through anything. And then he does it in such a way that the next day people cannot be mad at him. Like he can go back to who he is, because he didn't go too far. He didn't push. And so I really kind of thought that through that day, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to come in hard, because they need it. They need something to kind of stop the infighting. But I could have had him skate lines like the way I was, taught when I was a kid. But yeah, they would have hated me, but they probably would have continued to hate me. So I had to make it, still practice just harder on them, a little bit more grueling, a little bit more like over the top, but still in a light way. And without Ted Lasso existing, what do you like? Coaches go watch Miracle and they think that's how it gets done. That's how you win championships. And, that's just not the case. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. So, and what I'll just a quick one, Chris. One of the ways I look at that too is there's probably a trust factor. It's not like you did that day one. It's like coming in and just overly challenge, and effective coaching always boils down to a mix of both challenge and support. And too much support without challenge is not helpful and won't push and grow, but obviously too much challenge without support, and then being able to do those in the right times. And so, and then the other thing that I love about it and the way you're highlighting is like the playfulness and creativiness of being a coach, and how to pull out more. It's like, let's try something different. Let's be creative. Let's go outside of the box versus just, let's do it the way it's always been done, or scream and yell and command control old school tactics. And one of the other parts within that too is like, the old school mentality. A lot of people still sometimes hold on to it because structure matters, challenge matters. This new school ways, these, being vulnerable and understanding, connect with athletes doesn't mean there's no challenge or structure. It actually is. Like the literature highlights, you still need structure. It's an important piece, but being able to not overly do that and lose sight of the autonomy, support, and the caring. So, all right, jumped on top of you there, Chris. Do you want to jump in here as well?
Yeah, no, I just want to kind of draw some synergies. So that like you talk about you Dan, and coaching youth hockey and kind of the impact on kids at that age, and and being able to recognize the values that resonate with you from Ted Lasso, right? In terms of all that stuff, and then translating that back into what you do, and certainly what you could also impart on the coaches. Is there anything beyond, like anything kind of like you say that you can, like anything specific, let's say that would like rise to the top? If there's like three things that you'd say, these are the three things I would say that really hit home with you from watching the show to what what you consistently do, let's say with your players, but yet also what you impart on your coaches.
Yeah, I think, if I was trying to narrow it down to three, I would think vulnerability, number one, because, something I've talked about with some parents on the team, and this will be the first time I really talk about it big, but this year in coaching was a big mental health challenge for myself. And it wasn't to do with coaching, but I had my own mental health struggles come up throughout this hockey season. And at first I tried to kind of hide them and to say, like, go to the rink. The rink is my safe place. I don't need to worry about it, and go coach. But I wasn't bringing my full self to the rink. And so I pulled my coaches aside and told them what I was going through and said, hey, like, I need you to bring a practice plan today. I just can't do it. And I'm here to help and I'm here to do it, but like, I'm not in the spot I need to be. And that openness also opened the door to them, because we've all got our stuff going on, and maybe they're not dealing with anxiety, maybe they're not dealing with the same level of issues, but like, you can come and tell me that you're having trouble at home and you can't come to practice tonight, and I'm not going to judge you for it. Like, you need to stay home and take care of things. And like, I'm making that example up. I don't want my assistants to listen to this and be like, you said what? Like, that's a fake scenario, by the way. But I don't need their wives hearing this and being like, I didn't know we had trouble at home. But I want them to be able to say, like, if we can't bring our full selves, we need to rely on each other to fill in those gaps. And so there was that. And I think, and bringing to the players too was their own vulnerability and being able to say, like, they're struggling with anything. Like, I had a kid tell me he was struggling in school. And it was like, well, then how do I support you in that? Is it making sure you can skip practice to work on that? If you need to not be here because you need to be studying, I'm not going to bench you for it. I'm not going to short you shifts for it. I'm going to support you and do what we can. If it's, hey, we have teachers that work at the rink. Do you need me to help get you a tutor set up? I'll do that. But but also when on the ice, kids can come to me and say, I know kids don't want to pass to me because I'm not catching passes. That's a vulnerable state for a kid to be in, and be able to come to you and say that they understand that they're doing something that their teammates are noticing and they want to get better at. Right. And if they feel like they're going to come to you and say that, and you're going to be like, oh, you're right, and then move them off that line, well, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking to improve, not be punished for struggling. And so opening that door. So I think, so you got, to kind of kick out the door with vulnerability and being able and being open. So with your coaches, with your players. And then, that third one for me is what I bring to the bench. And it was something I worked on very hard this year. Was I'm a loud coach. I mentioned this when I was on the Glass and Out podcast. Leading up until this year, I don't yell angrily. I just am loud. But I realized it stops being effective when you're always loud. If I am just being loud on the bench and talking, but then a kid does something that maybe like they slash a kid when they're angry. They do, because I don't want to reprimand bad play in that way, but I want to reprimand bad behavior. And they're kids, they need to learn, like, hey, that kid made you mad, but you can't go two-hand them. You can't go badmouth the ref. But if I raise my voice then, but my voice is always raised, it's lost. And so this season too, it was about like, and I really took a lot from Ted here, was like that restraint to let the game play out. When something went wrong, not to panic and make big rash decisions. But when they come to the bench, praise them for the good things they did, have a quick conversation with them, let them lead that convo, because I think we all know this by now. When a kid messes up on the ice, they don't necessarily need us to tell them, they know.
Right.
So, but hey, what happened there? And they tell you, and you just have that little, on the bench, they're always much quicker than in the locker room, but let them lead themselves out of that. And then just say, cool, hey, I don't need to tell you anything, or if they honestly say, I don't know, coach, I don't have to be like, how can you not know what you clearly know? Okay, well, here, let me grab the board and show you exactly how you can, fix this thing. But I took watching the show, I gained a lot of like watching his restraint and like quietness to how he coached. And I was like, I think that would resonate with the kids I'm coaching. And so I kind of put it into action, and I think it worked for the most part, other than a few parents who were like, you didn't yell enough.
So you know what? It's funny, Dan, you say that, because so I don't know how much you know of our Cassidy and my history. So I coached Cassidy back when he played junior hockey. Okay. And then fast forward, Cassidy then coached my son going through minor hockey. So this kind of like a full circle piece. During that time when Cass was coaching my son, I know there were parents who were asking him to yell at the kids more, to be a lot more, because that seems to be the default position for a lot of parents, to be able to get performance, performance bumps, or to increase performance. It's almost like default. I got to yell at, or the coach has to yell. And I just find, in watching Ted Lasso, I find like your commentary about the restraint, both with the players and his coaches, and just in terms of games, it's like there's, it's an amazing kind of study, right? In terms of how he does have that self-control. And that's hard. Having been behind a bench at various levels, that's extremely hard. Knowing I've lost my restraint, I've lost my cool multiple times. But that, you start to, but when you watch, I find when I watch Ted Lasso, it's like, I wish I was like that. There's an admirability that I have for that style, because that to me is true leadership, because he's being who he needs to be. And I think the players respect that. And I just wish I was able to be like that. So it's an interesting commentary that you make. And that's why I wanted to ask you the question in terms of those three things. And I have a saying that I like to use a lot. And when I know Cass mentioned vulnerability, you mentioned vulnerability. To me, vulnerability allows for someone to be who they truly are, which really means that they're authentic. They're not BSing. They're not trying to be somebody who they're not. And authenticity has no competition. That's the quote I always like to say. So when we are authentic to who we are, we don't have to worry about competing against anybody else. And a lot of coaches, I find, get caught up in not being authentic, trying to compete, as opposed to being who they truly are. And I think that's the lessons that Ted Lasso's, what I find that has taught me a lot of. And I, it's nice to hear your input based on your experiences from, where you're coaching and how that's impacted you. So it's very similar is what I'm saying, I guess, in my little diatribe, but it's kind of unique. And I like hearing that, because there's like I said, I admire that in the show and in what Ted Lasso's been able to kind of teach me, and I think it's kind of a cool thing. So there's no question there. It's just a statement, and but just a kind of riff a little bit on what you just said. So yeah, I appreciate that.
You also reminded me of, this might be a fourth, but maybe since we can just make vulnerable one, this defaults to a third. But he also, he gives his players permission to fail. And I think we see that a lot in this season, spoiler alert, but when he kind of brings in total football, there's that allowance for that to not work. And he doesn't just drop it right away. And I thought, that also takes a lot of guts to say, we're going to do this new thing and it's going to be hard to do, but once we nail it, it's going to pay off. And that you have to give players permission to try and fail. And a lot of coaches struggle to do that. And I think, I steal a quote. I always say it's from NASA. I've heard that maybe it's not. But that NASA says they don't use the F word. They don't say failure. They call it, oh my God, I'm going to forget. Hold on. I have it written down. I write it down. I like it so much. But they call it, early attempts at success.
Love it.
And yeah, I don't want kids to be afraid of failure. So I don't want to take that word out and have them but when they go out there and they don't get something done, I don't want them to come back and be like, I failed at that. Well, you did. You tried it. It didn't work. How are you gonna retool it to try again? Because the goal hasn't changed, but maybe the way there has to just be modified a little. And I see a lot of that in the show. And I think that actually goes beyond the sport. I think the people in the show are allowed to fail. They're allowed to fail at their relationships. They're allowed to fail at their own healing. They're allowed to fail at all these different things. And I think having Roy come in and when the captain, I can't think of the captain's name right now, off the top of my head, but when he was struggling to play and be a captain, and Roy came in and took him to that pickup game, he was allowed to fail as a leader and not be kicked out of as the leader, because someone helped him and he found his way. And I think there's a lot of that in the show, which carries on. Those are lessons on the ice, and those are lessons in life.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I want to riff on a couple of things there, because when we talk about, embracing failure, not seeing it as such a negative thing, understanding it's part of the process, the whole fundamental growth mindset, which I think people generally are aware of and is becoming more common knowledge, but I wouldn't say it's inherently becoming common practice still, in large part because of the structure and there's various things. But also, even what's interesting, think of this as a coach and leaders, and I look back even when I was coaching, like I knew the growth mindset literature in and out. I was in the middle, like I'm studying it, I'm living it, but it's still hard to apply it. And if you want an athlete to embrace it and you're not doing it yourself, and then I would ask the question or get coaches to critically reflect, do you actually have a growth mindset? Do you actually embrace, like, if we lose and you embrace losing as the coach, or the mistakes and the failures, are you embracing your athletes and allowing them to fail? So you might say, yeah, it's okay for you to fail, but then are you pissed and frustrated when they make mistakes? So then it's like, because what's one of the best ways to teach your growth mindset? By example, and lead by example. And like, you stay composed when things aren't going awry, and which is what Ted Lasso is doing a great job of. And so, because I say this with the athletes we work with in different ways, they might get it, but it's like being able to develop and actually have a growth mindset is so much easier said than done in our society. Like, people are saying it all the time, but then like some of the best athletes, as like, and people like don't still have it fully. It's fixed, they label and they fear mistakes. And again, I think the structure in society in general is really, a big influence and factor on that. But, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it is a huge an important aspect, and the way that he does in the show, again, is a masterclass. And like, you want to learn and like, it's an enjoyable way to learn and self-reflect and understand these concepts. And even because sometimes like somebody might watch it, don't even know what growth mindset is, but they're getting exposed to it and the way that he carries himself and presents. And like, you admire it, and you therefore get inspired by it. And it can change your behavior through like almost like this osmosis or this experience in storytelling, which to me is also the best way to kind of learn, grow, is something that evokes emotion and story and that you can relate to. So yeah, so I'm pretty fired up about that. And I think even another interesting one, like I had to do this with an athlete, it goes in the same idea of like permission to fail, is like permission to be nice to yourself, because some of the most elite athletes, they don't like being nice to themselves. And then they've built up this habit where, no, I need to be hard on myself. Like, that's just who I am. Like, I'm not going to be nice to myself. It's like, you do that for years and years on end. There's an effect and a compound effect, and your self-image and how you see yourself and how you handle and deal with adversity, etc., becomes a lot more challenging. And so it's learning to break those walls down and giving them, because sometimes it's like, yeah, I know I need to be nice to myself, but it's like, okay, well, if you need permission, I'll give you permission to be nice to yourself. And it's like, oh, and just hearing that and talking through that and having a colleague, a coach, a mentor, or someone say that can actually really help people break through those walls and be like, oh yeah. And I'm now choosing to operate or show up with this mentality or this mindset now moving forward. So I don't know if you want to add to that, because I want to go back to the parents and youth sport, but I want to.
No,
I kind of went off on a couple tangents there.
No, I think that was great.
Before we go there, Cass, I want to talk just the failure component, because I think last week, we saw through the NBA with Giannis Antetokounmpo's video, about his little talk about failure, and it was interesting to hear the debate amongst pundits in the NBA, pundits in the NHL, pundits in the like all these pro sports were like talking about, oh, it is failure, it's pro sports, you got to win, whatever. But here's this guy who's two-time MVP, NBA champion, talking about this growth mindset. In essence, that's what he was referencing. And he talked about Michael Jordan playing 15 seasons but only won 6 championships. Like, so is he a failure than the other 9? Like, that whole concept is kind of interesting, and it's being able to then convey that mindset in terms of having this process to our athletes that we work with, the athletes that we coach, but then ultimately the parents. And I think that's where I'm sure Dan, as a youth hockey coach, therein lies a big issue. And that's not, like youth sports parents. It's not hockey parents, but youth sports parents, I think, are a breed unto themselves in terms of things. So how do you navigate that?
Very carefully.
Yeah, good for you.
I would say first, to all the parents returning to my team next season that are listening to this podcast, you're the best parents I've ever had, and I love having you on my team. But no, it's tricky because I think, even go back and use this year as an example. We made it to the playoffs first year in Pee Wee, so we're a first year team playing in a higher division, and we still make the playoffs. I'm looking at this as success. We get knocked out, and suddenly it's, oh, did my kid develop? I don't know if my kid developed this year. Oh, I think maybe we should look at other teams. And I started noticing parents tend to put development and winning in the same category, where if we would have won those rounds, no one would question player development. And now I could go back and do a chart of every player's development and say, oh, they got better here, not here. Like, it's not like it's not every player doesn't just rock it up. It's all different. Some people, thrived this year, some didn't. And it's a little back and forth there. But I started realizing that parents, number one, and it's hard for coaches to do, but setting like even better expectations of those goals, like what does it mean to develop versus what does it mean to win? We actually went and purposely found games to lose this year through tournaments for the development process. And what was funny about that is, so this year we played in the A division, and we knew this year coming up this season, that we were going to go double A. And I said, well, a lot of teams in California go up early and they just go get completely destroyed, and then they try to be better the next year. I didn't agree with that philosophy. I thought we should go be challenged and play in a division that's actually right for us. But I said, you know what, for tournaments, let's go do double A and let's go challenge ourselves. We can set this bar throughout the season of where we are and how we're developing. And first double A tournament, I had a big sit down. I said, look, these are all second year teams. They've been playing double A before. It's going to be a really rough trip, but let's find the good in it. So we went and we got our butts kicked. But I saw so many positives. I saw that we lost to teams by fewer goals than teams that were actually in like higher standings than us. I saw that our kids never quit. They played to that final buzzer and would get that one goal and just be like, we scored a goal against this team who no one else has scored against so far this tournament. And we would find those things. And then every tournament we'd go on, then suddenly we're winning a game. Then we're winning two. Then we're winning a couple and tying one. And I'm saying, look, like, here's us getting better. All those expectations set. Why aren't we winning banners at these tournaments? Why aren't we getting this? And I'm just like, wait, but I thought that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
But it's trying to, they're hard to deal with because you're trying to navigate that win mentality versus that development mentality. And at the end of the day, none of these wins technically matter. It's what you learn to go, the kids that are going to go beyond Bantam, the kids that are going to like maybe have, those small percentages of kids that have a chance to go do something, no one's going to look back at their first year of Pee Wee or their second year of Pee Wee anymore. Like, what matters is how you develop as a person, a player, and all of that. It's not the wins and losses. But that mindset hasn't broken away from most parents at this point. It is, but how's my kid going to make that team 3 years down the road if we didn't win 5 banners this year?
But good for you to have that kind of that philosophy, right? I think it's hard, right? Because in terms of that, a lot of coaches give in or capitulate to the parental mindset, right? And then they kind of go down that path, and it's good for you to stay true to that, because it's that's the purpose of why why hockey and why sports in general, right? So in terms of why we're all involved. So that's good for you. That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'll jump in after.
And, I'll even tell a very quick story of where I failed here, because that's part of the process is as a coach is failing. And when we were a 10U team, we made the state championship. So we were 10UA, top of our bracket, top of our division. And I mean, we finished in our league in the middle, but then we kicked into that next gear in the playoffs and just rode it all the way through. So we made it to our league championship, came in second, but automatically qualified for states, go to states, make it to the championship game. And I had parents in my ear nonstop. That line can't play. We're going to lose this game. And here I am, best team I've ever had in my life. And I take the bench and I let way too much of that parent talk dictate the lines I put on the ice. And we lost.
Okay.
So here I am losing, thinking those 3 kids, so all the kids were crying because we lost the championship, but those 3 kids are crying harder because they also didn't get to participate as much as everybody else. And I said, wait, I thought about it. I said, so I made parents happy and we lost, but I made kids upset. I feel like maybe it should be the other way around. And so I kind of said from that point on, no, I will make parents mad at me every time and not the kids.
Good for you.
Those kids should be on the ice. And a couple of those parents were pretty mad at me. And I've had to do a lot to try to start winning them back and say, no, look, like I'm human too. I went the wrong way. I let the chatter enter the bench, and that chatter should never enter the bench. And the reverse of it is I have people that, as this season ended, questioning me as a coach because I didn't sit those kids in the playoffs this time around. I put the next line out because that's what they're here for. I picked them to be on this team. And so now suddenly I'm like, wait, it doesn't matter what choice you make. You're going to get criticized in the stands no matter what. So make the choice that's right for the player every time. And so that's a lesson I keep imparting is, don't make the same mistake I did. And I'm not the only coach to have done it. And I'm sure coaches did it this year and they'll do it next year. But if I can pass that on, always side with the bench, shut out the chatter, and do right by the players. And in the NHL, they're going to sit and they still get paid $3 million for sitting. That's a whole different goal. They've made it to the top. Don't try to coach your youth team like you're in the NHL.
So Cass, I know you want to jump in. You struck me there, Dan, because I'm at this point in my kind of journey in my life right now in terms of it's great that coaches in general we listen to these NHL and these pro coaches in terms of what they do system wise and whatever, right? So it resonated with me in the first round of the NHL playoffs. The Boston Bruins are playing the Florida Panthers, and it was an interesting, I can't remember which game. I want to say game 3. And Tyler Bertuzzi had a puck inside. He was on the left wall in Boston zone. He got the puck and he just blindly passed it through the neutrals, through the middle of the ice in his own zone on Sam Reinhart's stick. Reinhart goes in and scores a goal. Okay. I'm thinking, okay, what's going to happen next shift? Guess what? Tyler Bertuzzi was out there the next shift. So here's where I've seen the big dilemma for me. We have these, we go and we listen to hockey coaches that are coaching the NHL about how to do different things on the power play or how to forecheck or do all these things, which is great. Great education, all for it. But yet, youth coaches a lot of times will bench that kid for making the same mistake that Tyler Bertuzzi made. But Jim Montgomery didn't bench him. And so that lesson that like an NHL coach is displaying in that context, which I believe is beyond the X's and O's. That was a human decision that Jim Montgomery said, I'm going to lift Tyler Bertuzzi up. I'm going to let him know he's a professional. I'm going to put him back out there. But youth coaches will sit there either A, verbally berate that kid for making that turnover because it ended up in a goal in the back of their net, and B, bench the kid. That for me is a bit of the the difference here. And I just think that's where coach education in my mind needs to have both parts. Like I love the X's and O's, and that's beautiful, and it's great, but I think we need to go beyond. And part of the beyond the X's and O's is being able to talk about these things. Like you just said, err on the side of the bench and the players, for youth coaches in particular. So it's not about benching that kid just because, and if they're not doing it in the NHL, then maybe that can filter down to youth hockey too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
The narrative matters, right? He's developed his narrative. Yeah, but that's just what elite sport does. We hammer the wheat. Is like actually some of the top NHL, they just roll 4 lines. Like it's like obviously not exactly, but and what's funny, and we mentioned this recently, junior hockey is like the burying 4th line guys. So nobody gets that little playing time generally in the NHL if they're on the 4th line. Anyways, so going off a rabbit hole, but I want to jump back 2 things on that. First, in terms of you did I really liked your sharing the humanizing the 10U and the playing time. I want to relate and share, and I think I've shared this maybe way back. My story, my first year as a head coach, minor hockey coach, we did pretty well. We ended up 600 winning percentage, didn't make the playoffs. Don't know how that, but anyways, side story. But I remember around Christmas time, I almost quit. I was like, because I was very much in the mind of trying to appease the parents. And I remember getting like this long email and so it was just like, I couldn't make them all happy. And in line with what you said, it was like, eventually I started to make that decision. Well, I'm going to coach the way I want to coach. And I can live with that. Like versus like, well, I got to coach based on what does everybody think I should coach? It's like, no, what feels right for me in my heart and what's best for the kids and what I believe. And I'm going to do what I feel is best. People don't like it. Screw them. Like that's their problem. They can deal with it. And, I thought that was important. And then also learning how to filter, and there's a bunch of other lessons, and go read my dissertation about that. But the premise, anyways, I just love the humanizing those experiences as a coach, because like that's the journey of being a coach. It's these crucial moments, the inner noise, the and especially in youth sport where there's so many parents and they have a lot of sway, and they're smart. There's some smart parents. Like Chris was pretty smart. Like, Chris is really smart. Chris was my mentor, but I had some other parents. They're smart. Like they're good people. And it's not that I wouldn't listen to them or never talk to them at all, but I had to really be mindful of how many parents I was talking with and the boundaries that I created. And, but it's definitely a factor to understand. And so I appreciate you sharing that. To loop back around, there's one thing I want to add to the parent discussion that I think is very valuable, and something's it applies for athletes as well. And we've been touching on it, but I think it really applies to parents, and it aligns with what you were saying, which is like, what is the priority of the parent? What is the priority of the athlete? And what is the priority of the parent? Meaning we can focus on development, we can focus on results, and we can focus on a category of mindset and enjoyment. And if we layered into those 3 categories, mindset and enjoyment, I'm going to put them together. And then, I like to actually color code them. Blue for mindset, green is skills, development, process, tangible, and red for results. And the idea is, as an athlete, let's talk about athletes first, and I'll bring it back to parents. What often happens, and one of the mistakes they make is, it's game time. What's my priority? Results. And as soon as you do that, it's red is the number one thing. Well, then what suffers? Mindset will suffer. You're going to get caught in the results trap. You're going to be more tense or worried or distracted, which therefore you don't play as well and actually hurts the results. It's the whole paradox of, focus on the process in order to get results, but then you're still prioritizing results. So we talk about that with athletes, and we want to, I want to learn to prioritize it as mindset and enjoyment. But what was interesting, recently I had a parent reach out who is actually a baseball parent. His kid's a top talented pitcher. And he's like, no, I'm working with the kid for a while. And he goes, I hired you to bring in to work on his mindset so he could get results. So he's like, yeah, focus on the mindset so my kid can get results. So that was his mentality. And then with the kid, I'm like, okay, trying to do this all with the kid. But then the parents still stressed watching him play, the demeanor and how he interacts. And the parents are an impact on the team and the culture and the athletes. And so, and at these different ages, and especially at the younger ages, eventually it's like, I'll tell a 17-year-old, like, yeah, don't worry about what your parents think. Like, you got to, like, they have that filter. They can, obviously we still want to work with them, but the premise being the parent finally, and we have like the resources and parent resources, and he listened to some of the podcasts, and eventually he's like, okay, it finally clicked for him. He like made the shift. He's like, no, I've been focusing on, I want my kid to focus on the process to get results. It's like, no, I want to enjoy this time and experience with my kid. I want to help him. I want him to develop life skills. Yeah, that will help him get results. And that is a goal and intention. I still think he can get goals and intent. And I have goals and intentions for him for that in a way, or support those goals and intention. But it's not my priority. It's not my why. What I'm about is this now. I'm about enjoying the car ride there, the car ride home. I'm about enjoying watching him. I'm more patient when he fails. I'm more patient with it. Like, so is this a complete mindset shift? He is way less stressed. He is way more supportive. It is very helpful for the athlete and the team. And again, and that's what we want with athletes too, to bring it back here. Think of like, what do all the best athletes say? Kobe, MJ, like LeBron, Messi, Nadal, like the priority is their mind and how they approach the game and the process. And when somebody can realize and make this flip of like, yeah, now I want to focus on my mindset and the process and things I can control so I can get results, to no, I'm focused on this because this is what it's about. I just enjoy, like, this is valuable to me. And this is where the meaning and the joy in the game is. That's when now teams get it, players get it, parents can start to get it. And I don't know if that was said succinctly enough, but it's stuff I've been preaching for a long time. It lines exactly with what you said, but I think it becomes such an important point. And again, like, it's Ted Lasso to a T. Ted Lasso, like, Ted, it's about winning. Like, early on in the season, you're gonna win. You're gonna beat these guys. Attack Nate, whatever. And he's like, nope. Like, it's gonna do it my way. I'm gonna I'm gonna coach the way I want to coach. I'm gonna operate the way I want to operate. He has a bigger why, a different why on a different level, a different priority than just the status quo, results-based oriented. It's the goals and intent around results is the driving factor. And when we're up here, this is where we're the most playful, creative. We enjoy the game. And when you're enjoying having fun, you're more likely to get the results as well. So anyways, long tangent. I think that's very relevant for not just athletes and coaches, but, the whole paradox or problems of dealing with parents as well. So not only you want to spin on that as well, Dan. I know we'll be mindful of time here. So
of course. Well, you made me think of Zava in this season, where if you remember in that first episode where it was like, you have to win. And he was like, what, like, okay, but like, and she was like, well, we can get Zava. And he was like, the team is gelling. They're working together right now. We've got what we need. He didn't most coaches get that bait of the best player around dangled in front of them, and they'll kick out 5 players right away to bring him in. And if you look at it, one of their players suffered. Like, there's that scene where they show who's being moved, and the team looks over like, are you okay? Because now they're disrupting the flow. And I'm actually I'm sure Zava's not done this season of the show. Like, I'm waiting for whatever this comeback looks like. But look at the results they're getting now. Like, that top player is gone. The team is regelled, and now like they're showing the wins. And that's such an important like lesson, because there is that mentality of like, you've got to go always get the best. And since I crapped on Miracle earlier, I'll also say there was that great line early on where he says, I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right players. And like that you see in Ted Lasso as well. They're bringing those right players into it. When they lost Jamie that first season, he was so proud that he felt like he was moving the needle on them. And by season 2, like, we saw a new Jamie show up. That's we're talking about a show like it's real life, but those are so real life examples of players and how they can change. And I think we've all heard stories of NHL players that come in with that, well, that was the best thing to ever happen to juniors. and then they're humbled. But then you also get the stories of like, what you hear about Sidney Crosby all the time is that like he came in right off the bat being like, I'm yours. Like I'm enjoying every moment of this. There was no cockiness to it. That's not always the case. And I like the player arcs change pretty quick in Ted Lasso. They are redeemed very much faster than in real life. But I love that they make these players and these people redeemable, but they also like they show how Ted can manage them and isn't just looking for that result. Like you just said, like, yeah, Zava's that result you want, but that wasn't his goal. He wasn't looking like Rebecca wanted the wins now because she was angry and she had a chip on her shoulder. You can lose a team that way. If you are just set on, I've got to go win every single game and I'm going to throw anybody out that doesn't do it, you're going to destroy everything you've got. And, I think what we're seeing is, play out on TV is, it's that you're right. It's those results come from everything else. The results aren't the goal. Those positive results happen because everything else just fell into place.
Yeah. Let me jump on that, Chris. I'm going to throw this to you because Calgary Flames versus the Florida Panthers. So this season and what's going on. I don't know not enough about the Calgary Flames comment, but I might have been old school coaching going on there. But like what's more impressive though, that I want to maybe highlight, what aligns with what you just said, Dan, is I'm sure you probably both heard the quote around Maurice, Paul Maurice. I'm gonna mess up his name there, but got a little word hole myself. But what he said about his team, I think he said back in like a month ago, the team took over the room. Have you guys heard that quote where it's like he's just a bystander now, and he has really given the ownership to the players, and he's built that cult, and he's just enjoying it. He just kind of helps manage playing time like a little bit, and like look at them just steamrolling through the Leafs and what they're and beating Boston, etc. And the impact on the results, but they've got a different way going on there versus like and the poor Calgary Flames obviously had a tough go. But I don't know if you want to speak to that, Chris. You know more of the ins and outs of all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, you know what? It's a funny thing. I mean, it's always hard. I think, and here we are. We're talking about Florida, like, a team that just squeaks into the playoffs, and but if you delve a little deeper, since January, Florida and Toronto Maple Leafs have had similar records. So in terms of they dealt with some injuries and whatnot, but. Yeah, I'd seen that quote where Paul Maurice said, "Hey, the team took over the room," which is, I think, what a coach, especially at the older levels, would want. They want that. They want to see that. They want to see a team, players take ownership, and that's so certainly is boding well right now. And they caught lightning in a bottle, beat Boston, come back and 3-1 against Boston and do that. And Boston had the best record of any NHL team in history. So right, it's there. So there's all kinds of factors I think that come into play. What I find interesting is just the very nature and the concept of a team. So when a coach sits there and says their team took over the dressing room, my immediate thought is that there's a commonality, or there's a kind of this common heartbeat or soul or spirit to the team. And so when you talk about the things that Ted Lasso was really kind of generating, and the idea of having when he talks about the total football and just Johan Cruyff and kind of bringing that in and just the whole idea of that concept, the very nature of total football is kind of involving everyone. And I don't want to sound too philosophical with respect to that, because sometimes there are individuals that take charge, but those you see championship teams, it's when individuals take charge on behalf of the team, not on behalf of themselves. So I guess and Dan, when I was listening to you speak, I can't help but wonder. I don't know if you guys have read that Matt Dumichel's comments or his new one about the Dallas Elite Stars, or Dallas Stars Elite program, the last one. Everything that you're saying is all about what's in that article about the Dallas Stars Elite program where they said to certain players and parents, hey, if you don't fit the narrative that we want for this team, this is what we're going to be about, this is who we are, then go. You don't have to stay. And there's strength in being able to stand up for your principles as an organization. And now they're reaping the rewards, as Matt indicates in that article, or in his delving of the hockey factories. So my point is, and you said it earlier, Dan, it's hard for coaches to kind of do that. From your perspective, and again, I know there's time constraints right now, but in your perspective and your coaching and everything that you've done, you don't have to get specific, but have you been faced with those kind of decisions? You've already talked about the one, but is there any others that you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I think they almost happen every game. It feels like sometimes, because you've got the voices that want to see this thing done. Especially in youth, it's a lot of my kid needs to play with this kid. Why aren't you doing it this way? I recently, a funny thing about San Diego is we don't get a lot of ice. As you can only imagine, we don't have, a million hockey rinks. And our program is a single sheet, and we get half ice twice a week. I very rarely get a full sheet to practice on. And that's fine. Like, there's some very fun full ice things to do, but the game, happens in this corner and then happens here. So I can break it up into stations. We can teach a lot. But I had a lot of parents asking for full ice. They were noticing like our speed wasn't as good as they wanted it to be against other teams. And I said, all right, hey, look, I love full ice drills. We haven't done a lot of them. I can do some. I can buy these couple of sheets of ice, but it's going to cost us this much money. And I had a parent call and say, all right, well, I want to help you make sure we raise this money to buy this. I think it's important, but I need you to explain to me right now every single drill you're going to do and why you're going to do it.
Oh my goodness.
Because he had it very set that like, these are the things we have to work on and you're gonna have to do it. And if you're not seeing what I'm seeing and you're not going to do what I'm seeing, I'm not going to help you raise the money for it.
Wow.
And I was just like, what? Like, number one, we haven't bought the ice yet. So it's not like I'm sitting there like, okay, well, I made these practice plans well in advance because I have nothing else to do. But also I was just like, I would never dare ask a coach, show me your practice plans or I'm not doing this. And now that the season's over, it's looking at, okay, well, this is how I'm going to do things next year. This is my plan. The door's there. I want your kid on this team. Your kid was a great kid, because I try not to hold parents against the kids as much as I can. Because I looked at success this year. If I brought my 16 kids into a locker room and said, who wants to play with me next year? I get 16 hands, I believe. I don't get 16 parents. But I let if the parents want to take their kid away, hey, I can't help that. But they're going to get who they get. And my practice plans for those full ice, well, their kids are going to know when they get on the ice. That's the answer there. I know we need to work on. Maybe doesn't line up with what you think, but I'm thinking of the development and our goals in that development, not, hey, we're not doing great on the penalty kill this year. Yeah, maybe we didn't do, honestly, I can't remember if we did or not anymore, but like that at that point, that wasn't our penalty kill wasn't a priority. It was developing different aspects of the game. We were playing a faster game. We were playing against bigger kids. And I was trying to bring in that next level from going from 10U to 12U. I wasn't focused on, we have to have the best special teams in the league. And so that has a lot to do with it. It's just like, here's who you get. Doors over there if you don't like it. And I think at the end of the day, you wind up with parents that are like, that's the team I want to be on, and they come to it. And I think that's, Dallas Stars Elite created that.
Yeah.
We don't want this, they leave. Well, guess what? Someone else wants to come in and take that spot. And eventually it takes time, but that churn is going to bring in just those people that believe in what you're doing and want to be there for that reason.
Right. Which is what I spoke about earlier, which is the authenticity of it. To me, that's huge. That's important. So yeah. I think it's important that coaches maintain that as much as possible, right? So yeah.
Well, I love it. Well, I want to be mindful of our time, and maybe we'll do another one of these soon. So that we get to some more Ted Lasso follow-ups. I don't know if you have anything you want to, final thoughts, things to share, Dan, or plug your blog and stuff with the coach's site, but as we wrap up here.
Yeah, no, I think I watched Ted Lasso. You're going to enjoy it. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned in there. I mean, my wife loves the show. She doesn't coach a sport. She doesn't play a sport. She could care less about soccer, but it's a great story. There's a lot that you can take into it. So, I don't want people listening to this being like, well, I don't really care about sports. Like, that show is not about sports. Sports is just a vehicle they use. And then, to plug myself, if you're a member of the coaches site, go check out my stuff. If you're not, I'm sure you guys have a code that they can sign up with. I'll let you plug yours and not mine. But go read and please, if you've got questions and you're a youth hockey coach and you need any help or guidance or are stuck, find me. I'm on Twitter at Dan Arel. You can email me at dan@danarel.com. Let's chat. I love talking about coaching. I love being available. So
Awesome.
I'm there.
I got to show you guys this.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that?
I got this. My wife got this for me for Christmas. These are mints. These are
That's awesome.
These are mints. So Ted Lasso mints, believe. Yeah, pretty cool.
I meant to wear my Ted Lasso shirt today and then totally spaced on it.
I don't have my Ted Lasso socks on. I do have those, so they're dirty. Wear them all the time.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dan. This was
Thanks,
awesome,
Dan.
and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Dan.
Yeah, sounds great.